State Senator Ceci Maher represents the 26th District in Hartford. It includes Westport, Weston, and parts of other towns all the way up to Ridgefield. She chairs the Children's Committee and is Vice Chair of Higher Education and Employment Advancement. A licensed social worker, Senator Maher worked before politics with children and youth in a psychiatric hospital, then moved to nonprofits, including Horizons Student Enrichment and Person to Person. She also led Sandy Hook Promise, supporting gun violence prevention programs. Senator, welcome to 06880, the podcast.
Thanks, Dan. It's great to be here.
So what happened? You woke up one day and said, I want to be a state senator?
Well, actually, I had a lot of training in speaking to groups as a principal fundraiser of nonprofits. And so and obviously working with state legislators, going up to Hartford, advocating. And I went to the campaign school at Yale in 2015. And that was a fantastic experience, learned a lot, but continued working at Person to Person until 2019. And then, as you said, went to Sandy Hook Promise as an interim executive director. And that was a year, 13 months. And then in that spring, I guess, summertime, I got I'm trying to keep the timing right. I think it was in summertime. I got a call from Will Haskell. He wanted to have a beer. And so I said, sure, let's have a beer. So we met and he asked me to run for a seat. So that was really when he said, take some time and think about it. And I said, I don't need any time to think about it. This is something that I've always been wanting to do since I was at the campaign school. And I would never have run against him. For heaven's sakes, he was doing a phenomenal job. But the honor of being asked by him to take his work forward and to represent our towns, remarkable. So that was the origin of why I started running.
The Yale Campaign School, nonpartisan.
Yes.
First Select Woman Jen Tooker has gone there.
We were in the same team at the same time.
So what is that school and what's it like?
It is intensive. You start at 8 a.m. in the morning. You go all day. Then there's dinner presentations, and then you start working on a campaign. And Jen and I were on the same team that was working on a facsimile of a campaign. And you put together the entire week, every night, up till 1 at least in the morning. And then on Friday, everyone presents their campaign to the rest of the school.
So what's it like to actually to go from the theoretical to the practical and actually run for the Connecticut State Senate?
Well, it's interesting. It's, number one, it's tremendously overwhelming at first as a first-time candidate and getting to know everyone. It's 8 towns that I represent, and that includes, I'll just sound them off, Westport, Wilton, Weston, Reading, half of Ridgefield, and a portion of New Canaan, Darien, and Stamford. Having worked in both New Canaan and Darien, I felt that I knew those communities. I grew up in Stamford. So the places that I really needed to learn the most about were Ridgefield, Reading, and Westport. I've been coming to Westport my whole life. I grew up in Stamford. I've lived in Wilton since 1989. I know this area really well. I'd been volunteering for Westport Pride on their advisory committee. But getting to know the town is completely different than accessing services or volunteering in the town. So it was a lot of learning. It was and I like to think of it as like the first 3 months were deep dive into learning about the towns and getting to know people and having conversations. And then the second 3 months were all about getting out there into the community, talking to groups, expanding knowledge about the area, but also people connected with. And then the last 3 months were all about the door knocking, just door after door after door, 4,000 of them. So it was a lot of work, a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I met great people.
So what did you learn about Westport?
It is a way more interesting town than I had realized on the outside. I knew what a great town it was. I knew about the beaches. I've walked my dogs at Campo in the wintertime forever. That obviously the shopping's great. But what I've learned about Westport is what an incredibly committed, volunteer-focused town it is. How passionate people are, how engaged they are, the entire RTM process and the way it runs is impressive.
And you learn it just by talking and observing and being in places and things like that.
I mean, that's really all you can do. I mean, meeting up with new people, attending events, Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, just every event that I could do in the first year.
Any real surprises, besides the volunteerism and all that, anything that made you say, wow, this is remarkable?
I think everything was a real surprise. Well, that's not true. Everything was really interesting to get to know the town. We had just been coming out of COVID. So this is, 21, we're still sort of like starting to get to know people at the end of 21, then going into it in 22. We're still coming out of COVID. Seeing the impact of that on everyone, learning how much Sherwood Island is sort of in Westport's backyard, and that is such a huge piece of what people use, for walking and getting
people
outside.
Discovered it during COVID. It was just not a part of Westport until COVID.
Oh, it wasn't?
Really.
I didn't know that.
Nope.
I had no idea, because when I got there, when I started learning, I thought that this was something that had been ongoing.
Westport ignored Sherwood Island until COVID.
I had no idea. But the other thing that I learned in getting to know the towns, one of the things I learned about Westport is just how important the environment is and the impact of growth and development on the waterways, on the water systems. And, we saw the flooding most recently in downtown last week. These are things that I am greatly concerned about. And these are things that I want to work on and help mitigate, and also make sure that Westport stays the town that it is and doesn't go underwater.
What can you do?
Advocating with our federal government, because that's where a lot of the funds come through, and then working with the Westport delegation. So that's Dominic Johnson, Jonathan Steinberg, working with them, and then advocating in the Environment Committee for support, because coastal mitigation is so important.
Westport as one of the 8 towns, you mentioned all the 8 towns, and they're all fairly suburban. It's even Stamford, you've got the suburban portion of Stamford. Is Westport any different than the rest of the towns?
Every town has its own, I don't know what, feeling. Wilton is very different than Westport. Westport has a much more urbane way of looking at the world. Maybe that's the proximity to the railroad in New York. It's the nature of the highly educated populace of the town. So it's very art-driven and focused, education-focused. So it's a different kind of town. It's a bigger town. It's the biggest town. Ridgefield and Wilton and Stamford, Darien, New Canaan, they're all different.
Yeah.
They have different focuses and different reasons why people choose to live there.
What's it like having to represent all those different towns?
Well, I have to say, having, as I said, worked in Darien and New Canaan, I grew up in Stamford, including when I was campaigning, I knocked on both the doors of the homes that I grew up in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was really fun. And then I've lived in Wilton, for 35 years. And the only 2 towns that I really needed to get to know more were Reading and Ridgefield, because I live a mile away from Weston. I'm always over in Weston. So what was it like to learn those towns? One of the things, when people say to me, do you like the job of being state senator? And I'm like, yes, I love it, because I love to help people. I did that at Person to Person. Certainly was doing that at Horizons, Sandy Hook Promise. That's key to me, is helping people. So that's number one. Second thing, I really like people. So I like to meet new people. And the third thing is I love going to community events, because community is the underpinning of everything, and creating community and bolstering community. So I just feel tremendously lucky to have this job.
So you get the job, you get elected. What's the learning curve like?
What's
it like to walk into the Capitol?
Oh my gosh, I can't even begin to tell you. So as a senator, we are automatically put on as a chair of a committee. We're automatically put on as a vice chair of a committee.
Day one, you become a
chair?
Day
one, you're the chair, co-chair with the House chair. And then I'm on 4 other committees. So I'm 6 committees, day one. And so learning the process, I'd been up to Hartford a lot. I advocated, I've been in and out of offices. I've talked to lots of legislators. It's different when you're sitting in the seat. And so for the first couple of months, I just was watching and learning and paying attention to dynamics. In the very first day, this is funny, I'm walking into the Senate chamber, and I had people saying, hello, Senator, and I'm thinking, gosh, how the heck do they know me? I don't know who anybody is. Well, come to find out that people are given photograph sheets, so they know us even if we don't know them. So so that was really interesting. The first couple of months were really about watching, learning. I am a social worker, as you mentioned, and so my job is to observe, to see how people interact, to understand motivation, and that's what I spent my first couple months doing, while also chairing and vice chairing committees. So reading bills, doing screenings, all the things that one does up there, and building relationships, which are also key.
And what have you learned about your fellow senators?
It's very interesting. I know that oftentimes I hear, those people up in Hartford, or perhaps more denigrating language than those people. But what I've learned is, I would say for the greatest part, almost everyone is there because they're dedicated to doing the work. They really care.
Both sides of the aisle.
I would say both sides of the aisle. People bring their own viewpoints, but people really care about making a difference and really care about the legislation that they're working on. And sometimes that legislation doesn't get passed, and sometimes it does. And I was very lucky as a first-time senator to have a win and to be able to get the children's behavioral health advocate set up. And also legislation around governance to address book bans. So that's unusual for a first-time person to get legislation. Clearly in the Senate, it's a little easier than in the House. But I do think that everybody up there, despite their point of view or what they're there for, really cares about the work that they're doing.
And what have you learned about the rest of Connecticut, the rest of the state?
It's a remarkable state. We're small. We punch way above our weight. There's 100,000 roughly people per senator. So that means we have about roughly 3.6 million people in the state. We have such great diversity from I'm thinking right now environmental diversity, from our waterways to our mountains to the hiking to the outdoors. We just have so much. We've seen growth I was just at a biotech conference this morning. We've seen growth in biotech in Connecticut. We certainly are seeing a focus on not just biotech, but also technology in Connecticut. We're looking at manufacturing. As a state, we are growing and really positioned well. We're financially solvent, which is remarkable, and really paying down our pension funds. So we're poised for great things. And I see that and I hear that, especially in this conference this morning, listening to people talk about the education of the college students and the impact in the state college university system and at Yale, the private institutions, at UConn. There's so much focus on how do we prepare our students for the future and then keep those students in state.
That's been a problem in the past.
Yes, but I think everybody recognizes that now and is working towards it.
So does Hartford, meaning everyone in Hartford, care about Fairfield County?
You know, I know that our legislators care deeply about Fairfield County.
Well, you do. You have to. You get
I
paid
do.
for that.
Well, yeah, but I do anyway, or I wouldn't have run. And I know that all the other legislators from the different delegations for the different towns care about Fairfield County. So we have a very strong voice. And we get together as delegations, you know, people who are legislators for that town, and we talk about how can we make things better.
But it's been said that, you know, a lot of times that Hartford looks at Fairfield County as the ATM for the state, and at the same time, you know, they think of us as sort of suburban New York. Do you get that sense?
I really don't. I mean, I know that is something that is said, but I don't see that. I know that I was able to bring back millions to the district in bonding and in support through grants. And that happens because I know that we have a governor who cares about Fairfield County.
He's from Greenwich.
He is from Greenwich.
You mentioned some accomplishments, the couple of bills that got passed. What are the kind of impact do you think you've made in your first term?
I think listening to people and representing them and hearing what they have to say and helping constituents who have had problems, helping them get resolution on those problems. I mean, weren't always able to do it, and I'm still working on a couple of things that are up in the air, but that's what I think a legislator is there for, in part, is to help navigate all the different commissions and all the different areas of government that affect our lives.
What's a problem or an issue that a constituent would contact you about?
Often it's about DOT. Often it's about transportation. It's about roads. It's about stoplights or stop signs or speeds, things that really do affect our people every day on the ground. Traffic in Westport is a huge one I hear about. I can't always fix that because...
I was going to say,
yeah.
Can you please fix it?
No. Listen, I've been caught at that corner as many times. I've been late to pick up kids at trains, you know, the whole thing. But though I'd say that traffic is a huge component of what we hear about, I know that adding my voice, I know that Will was really strong in that area, and I'm adding my voice to that. I'm trying to think what other things. Oh, a perfect example. We had someone who had not gotten their Connecticut state tax return back, and it had been going on for months, and they weren't having any success, and we were able to turn that around in less than a day. Mm-hmm. So, you know, those kinds of things, because I have a phenomenal legislative aide, and so he's terrific.
Okay.
And he was actually Will's legislative aide, which meant that he has all that history and knowledge of serving the district, and he knows all the pathways. So I've been very lucky in that way.
Frustrations?
Frustrations. The incrementalism of government. Now, and I understand it's a two-edged sword. On the one hand, we want to make sure that any legislation that we pass doesn't have adverse effect. On the other hand, I know some legislation that we pass does have adverse effect or immediate impact. It's it's hard to know that we have to take baby steps when I want to fix things.
You've always had a focus on children, social worker, and with Sandy Hook Promise. You've mentioned before you've been a advisory member of Westport Pride, which is the town's LGBTQ group. How did that come about?
Well, it's Brian McGonigal is a friend, and interestingly, he worked with my husband years ago. Oh. And so we reconnected when I was with Person to Person, and he was working at a company, and they were giving a check, and Brian was like, Ceci, and I'm like, Brian. And so we've been friends, and when he was starting Westport Pride, he asked if I would be on the advisory committee. I was honored to be asked, and yes, of course.
So getting back to Westport and your activity here, what are your go-to places?
Go-to places. Well, I love to take my dogs to walk at Campo in the winter. They love it. I'd love to go walk at Sherwood Island in the summer and the winter. Several restaurants in town. Several stores, I won't name them
come on.
in case I leave.
No. That's what people want to hear.
Okay.
Where do you shop? Where do you eat?
Okay. Well, I kind of shop all up and down the street, the main street. Also Anthropology. Mm-hmm. Eat at Stone Pony. Spotted Horse. I always do that. I transfer that in my brain.
Stone Pony is where Bruce Springsteen played.
That's why it's in my head. At Spotted Horse. And I'm trying to think what other places. Oh, shop at Whole Foods. And then, Gigi and Joe's and Mrs. London's. Mm-hmm. Because, of course, lots of coffee when you're a legislator. And notice I say legislator, not politician, because I think politician has such a negative connotation. And I don't see myself as a politician per se, because I think that is
it's real pejorative.
It is a pejorative. And I think that the legislators I know actually care, as I said before, care deeply about the work they're doing, as I do. So I don't want to take on that appellation. I prefer to say legislator. So yes, and Mrs. London's has the most amazing pastries, which I love to look at but don't eat because that's dangerous. So that's pretty much and of course the library. It seems like I'm here a lot. Oh, also outdoor music at the Levitt.
At the Levitt?
I mean, and the farmer's market, phenomenal. Love going to the farmer's market. Of course, now it's over at Gilberti's. That's kind of I don't have a lot of time to shop and eat, so unfortunately. But
you were listing all the Zoom meetings that you've got, and it's just, I don't know how you do it. But I'm really interested when you made the distinction between legislator and politician.
Mm-hmm.
Connecticut, I think, is a pretty reliably blue state, but there are plenty of Republicans in the state Senate. What's your relationship with them? How do you get along with them? And
well, every committee has a House chair and a Senate chair, and then vice chairs, both ranking, which are the non-majority party, and the majority party. So we're balanced in those committees. And so I work with them in the different committees in that capacity. And there are some wonderful people in the Senate. And I have, there are only 36 of us.
Right.
So there is a lot of opportunity to get to know people.
Who do you hang out with?
Who do I hang out with? Honestly, there's not a lot of time to hang out. I have to say, when the Senate is in session, I'm sitting in the chamber because I want to learn, and I know I have the option of sitting in my office and watching from a TV, but I want to be in the Senate chamber and listen and watch and learn from everyone, and hear what people have to say and what their opinions are. So, honestly, I don't go hang out in other people's offices very often because there's really not a lot of time.
Who's the most interesting colleague?
You're going to put me on the spot here, Dan. Let's see. Okay, this is one of the things you're going to know about me is I find everybody pretty fascinating. So just as I like every town for the different ways that they are, I value the different pieces that the senators bring to the table. I have to say that I am blown away, and this sounds like I'm kowtowing, but I'm not. I'm blown away by the President Pro Tem, Marty Looney, his knowledge. He is deeply knowledgeable. He's got a mind like a steel trap. He has history that backs up his opinions. He can talk about things that happened ages ago and put them in context with Senate things, legislation. So he's impressive. I've been impressed by my fellow freshmen, what they bring to the table and the ways in which they show up in their work. So, it's, I follow the people who have been there for a while because I want to learn and do the job well. So I'm interested in how they show up so that I can learn from them.
And you are still interested in young people.
I am.
So what's your message to them when they come to visit you or when you speak to them?
I talk to a lot of young people, and some not so young. People who are thinking about perhaps running or getting involved in politics. So I do talk to a lot of people. What's my message to them? My message to them is take risks. I mean, I can tell you this is pretty funny. When I told my older sister that I was going to be running for the Senate, she goes, well, how could you be a senator? Which I thought, she's since apologized. But it was very funny because she thought that you had to have a law degree, which, of course, you do not have to have a law degree. And I tell kids, take a risk, try things you've never tried before, jump off a few proverbial cliffs, see what your skill sets are, learn your skills and learn new ones, and expand on the ones you have. And you can't do that if you stay safe all the time. So that's really, take risks, I think, is one of the biggest things. And there isn't just one prescribed path in life. I mean, if you go back further than when I was working at the psychiatric hospital as a social worker, I was a buyer at Lord & Taylor. I traveled internationally. I flew to Asia. I worked negotiating in factories in China, Hong Kong, Taipei, Seoul, to get merchandise brought back for Lord & Taylor and then for a buying office. That was phenomenal. And that was a remarkable experience in several ways. One, it showed me that everybody cares deeply about their children, their families, and their communities. Because in other places in the world, from Japan to Hong Kong, I saw that. And then the other thing it taught me was when you're negotiating for something, always listen to the other person and leave them some respect in the conversation, because you can negotiate really hard, but the deal could fall apart if you negotiate so hard and walk out feeling like you got everything you wanted and the other person did not. So that was a fundamental lesson that I learned when I was in my 20s, early 20s, traveling around the world. And I think that has always informed the way I look at people and having them take something away and I'll take something away. And hopefully we may not get everything we want, but hopefully we can work together. And that's really important.
A great message, if only you could deliver it to the U.S. Senate rather
Yes.
than the Connecticut State Senate. But State Senator Ceci Maher, thank you for being on 06880, the podcast, and continued good luck in Hartford.
Well, thank you, Dan. It was really a pleasure to be with you.
Thanks.